This is a story that actually inspired some questions. And who's familiar with this picture? Anybody know this guy? Absolutely, Richard Fosbury. One of my favorite sporting stories. I'm not much of an athlete, but I like a good story, especially when it involves somebody that's kind of a tall geek. I wasn't tall, but I was definitely geeky. And when Richard Fosbury, this guy, went out for track initially, he was so tall he was not fast. But they took one look at him and said, "You, sir, are in the high jump," right? Because at the time, it was in the mid-'60s. He was from Oregon. They took one look at him and they said, "You are a high jumper." Because at the time, basically, there was kind of a couple of different ways that you do it. You would go up to the bar in the high jump and you would do what they call a barrel roll, where you just try to roll over the bar. Or there was also the scissors, which, I'll be careful, I'm not going to go too high. That's scary, right? Yeah, you guys started to look a little concerned. But you actually scissor kick over the bar. And so it really did take a tall person. And the reason for that was, at the time in the mid-'60s, what you did was you would go over the bar and you would land on a pit of sawdust, about 12 to 18 inches of sawdust, which it wasn't at ground level. It had to be about 6 inches below ground level because you didn't want it to get messy, right? And so these guys would go up and you would do your best to give your all and get over that bar, but you also wanted to try to land on your feet because although sawdust might be a little better than cement, it wasn't much better, right? And so they took one look at Richard Fosbury and said, "You, sir, are high jump material." But you know what? He stunk. He stunk at it. He stunk at it. He actually didn't make the track team. As they tried to teach him the whole thing, he just couldn't pick it up. He wasn't that good. He wasn't that coordinated. And the scissor, if you can believe it, or the barrel roll, took a lot of coordination, and he just couldn't master it. But there was a small but simple change that happened in the mid-'60s. And Richard Fosbury was the only one to take advantage of it. And we'll get back to that in just a second, because basically his story continued. What he did was he decided to start mastering a totally different technique. That basically he would run up to the bar and go over backwards, right? Now, he was the only one doing it. And like I said, he was a bit of a tall geek. So his coaches actually asked him to stop. One of them was known for saying, "Rich, you look like you're having a seizure in the air." I mean, he really did. He's like, "Stop it. You're embarrassing the team," right? Especially as he was getting used to this new technique. But all of a sudden, he started to master it. And he was able to start to hit heights that was getting him not only into track meets, but winning track meets, to the point where he won nationals. And then he went on to be on the Olympic team for the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, Mexico. Now, what's fun about that particular story is that he took this technique, this kind of seizure in the air technique, all the way to the Olympics. He was the only one doing it, though. So when he first did it in Mexico City, there were thousands and thousands in the audience, in the crowd, right? And they didn't know what to do with it. They first saw him flop over this bar, and it was just stunned silence. But then they started to get behind him, right? So the next time he went over, unanimous, "Ole!" Right? The crowd erupted to see this crazy, bizarre technique. And he was the only one doing it. He took it all the way to Olympic gold. He won the gold in Mexico City, but not only that, he set a new Olympic record, a new world record for the high jump with this crazy new flop. They actually, as you know the story, call it the Fosbury Flop now, right? Now, I love that story. That story in and of itself is a great story. It's an inspiring story, especially when tall geeks, I mean, at least the geeks unite, right? Especially when they win big. But what I love about this story personally is, to me, it uncovered a bit of a question that we can all use. Because when you go back to the mid-'60s, something happened. There was a small but significant shift, and Richard Fosbury seemingly was the only one to take advantage of it. And I haven't been able to track down exactly what caused it. I'm not sure if it was an overzealous lawyer, a protective mom, a nervous track coach. But basically, the pit went away, and they brought in mats. At first, they just put foam in mesh nets, and then they went to gymnastic mats. They did it across the board, not just in the Northwest, but they did it across the board, across the United States and then around the world. But Richard Fosbury, this tall geek, was the only one to change adapt his technique to take advantage of that small but significant change? And to me, that's the question that we can start to ask ourselves. We can start to say, okay, this is the question that Richard Fosbury inspired. Are what small but significant changes are happening right now around us? And maybe, just maybe, how could they work for me? How could they work for us? How many times have we missed opportunities like all of Richard Fosbury's competitors because we were blinded to a small but significant change? Sure, we were headlong in it. We experienced it, but we didn't take advantage of it like a Richard Fosbury did, right? That's just, it's core. And it happens to all of us. But when we're aware of it, when we're looking for it, it's amazing what we can do and start to uncover. And I mean, we can expand this out to say, okay, what small but significant changes are happening right now in my industry, in my workplace, with my clients, with the people that I work with my customers, with your agents? What are some significant, and sometimes they're not so small, right? Significant shifts that are happening around them. And maybe, just maybe, how can they work for me? How can I help them work for them? It seems preposterous almost sometimes, almost offensive to think that it could be that simple. But in some ways, even the things that offend us the most are probably things where we need to be looking for some truth, right? Interestingly enough, I haven't been able to meet with Richard Fosbury yet. I've been able to talk with his secretary, but I haven't been able to meet with him. But I was able to meet with one of his peers, someone who almost made the Olympic team with him. And I met with him last summer. And I went and talked with him. And actually, I had to go meet with him. He was a track coach. And I got to meet with him on a hot summer day in July. We met under a shade tree, and he was getting ready for practice, and he agreed to meet with me for just a little bit. And the question that was, I asked him some general questions about the experience and what it was like. But the question that I just couldn't wait to ask him was, so what did you think when they rolled out that mat? That first time when you walked onto the field and you saw a mat instead of the sawdust, what'd you think? And his reaction shocked me. It really did, because I didn't prep him for that question. I kind of surprised him with that question. And so I saw his raw reaction in that nanosecond where I asked it, and then he kind of controlled himself a little bit. His immediate reaction was, I hated that mat. I hated it. And he kind of caught himself I said, wow, okay, why? And he said, honestly? I said, honestly. And he was a tough guy. And he said, I saw that mat and I thought, now everybody can do the high jump. So he said, my first reaction was, I hated that mat. And I just got to wonder how many people reacted to the mat in that way. And what did it do? It blinded them, right? They didn't start to see new opportunities. They just started hating that mat. They had to deal with the mat as opposed to look for opportunities. And we all can do that. Anytime there's change, anytime there's new developments, we can all be kind of blinded either by the things that we see initially and maybe you get offended by or frustrated with, and to be able to go, wait. All right, where's some opportunity? Where could there be opportunity in this? I was just